It's the final of the Women's World Cup, and the two players that have battled their way through this knockout tournament are both from India. So we have Humpy Koneru, I think, without doubt, the strongest female chess player that India has ever produced, 38 years old. And she is playing against Divya Deshmukh, 19 years old and a rising star in India. So we've got a battle of two generations. It's going to be fascinating. So two classical games are played in the final. And they played the first today, Saturday. And I'm going to take you through this first game. And it's a fascinating battle. We've got a really interesting think and drink moment for you that's going to test your attacking skill. So watch out for that. Here we go. Playing white, Divya, and she goes d4. And a queen's gambit. And Humpy takes the pawn. Queen's gambit accepted. Now there's many moves here. Knight f3, e3. But Divya goes for e4. That's a sharp move. e5, that's the standard continuation, offering a pawn in order to exchange queens here. Knight f3, again, that's the standard move. Now it's possible to take here, that's one of the other main lines, but Humpy checks on b4. And now bishop d2, you could say, is the main move here. But knight c3 from Divya, she played it quite quickly, so this keeps the tension in the position. Very difficult position. Knight f6. Knight takes pawn. So there's all kinds of interesting things going on here. Watch out for a potential check, winning the bishop. b5 holds on to the pawn on c4. So that stops this bishop from entering the game. Now, f3 has been seen before. That's fairly solid just to protect this pawn. But Divya plays bishop e2. So that's more aggressive because white intends castling very quickly. Knight e4 has to be the critical move here, but then white will just castle and start giving pawns away. Fascinating position. But Humpy thought for almost 10 minutes here and played bishop b7 instead. And Divya just castled. Just got the king out quickly. Now, if white can maintain this nice centre, that's very good. So Humpy exchanges on c3 and takes on e4. So what's the score? Well, at the moment, black is a pawn up. c3 is attacked, but black hasn't yet castled. So Divya played bishop a3, preventing black's king castling. And this is such a tricky position because f7 could be vulnerable here. But c3 can be taken. Now this is interesting. Humpy decided just to block that bishop with knight d6. Why not knight c3? Well, after this, I think that leaves black's king in some trouble. Not easy to block a nasty discovered check. So that's why knight d6 was played. But for the pawn, white has tremendous activity. Bishop f3. So the initiative starts. Already, of course, threat to take here and take here. And yeah, not so easy for black because, of course, if you exchange, then that brings the queen to this fantastic square, looking at the rook, looking at f7, bishop takes d6, threatened. So Humpy played queen c8 just to protect the bishop. And now there's a couple of very tempting moves. Rook b1 is possible, but Divya just took on c4. Very interesting piece sacrifice. So it's really tricky. If the knight takes, then there's going to be a very nasty check. Queen e2 actually looks very good indeed. Rook e1 also looks very good. So pawn takes knight. Rook e1 check. And here black should play king d8. And, well, white certainly has compensation there. But that is black's best try, king d8. Pretty nasty having your king running around the middle of the board. But Humpy played king f8. Right, here is where we have our think and drink moment. So if you're playing white, how do you play in this position? Cheers. White play. So the question is, what's the best way to maintain white's initiative? How can you put the maximum pressure on black? Now Divya exchanged on b7 and then played queen e2. We'll look at that game continuation, of course, in a moment. But the best move was to play queen e2 immediately. So this sets up a threat. Taking here and then checking. Well, let's see this. So bishop f3, bishop takes knight, a check on e7, and a very standard checkmate on the back rank. So that is the threat after queen e2. Okay, so what about, well, how does black get out of this? Okay, what about moving the knight to c6 to stop this check? Well, then d5 pushes the knight again. And then the knight is simply trapped on a5. Now, the black king can escape. But after this, I mean, you can see that black's position is collapsing. Okay, the king can step out, but c7 drops, two bishops, the knight is attacked. Winning position for white. Okay, what else is there? Knight d7. Okay, got to get some pieces out. But then an exchange, a check, queen takes, and again, white's initiative is just rampant here. Bishop takes, knight is threatened. There's, of course, back rank problems, but this must be winning for white. So queen e2 is the best move, and black is just so tied up that it's very hard to escape white's attack. But instead, Divya, after 7 minutes, played bishop takes bishop. And then queen e2. But this isn't quite as good because black has just brought the queen off the back rank, and after knight c6, bringing the rook into play, then actually black escapes. So remember, black is still a piece up here. So white needs to react very quickly. So d5 attacks the knight. Now, moving the knight would be disastrous. We've already seen this check, and bishop takes knight, and yeah, trouble on the back rank. But here's where Humpy plays a superb defensive move. Maybe you can have a little think about this one. Black to play. h5. This is really the only move that keeps black in the game. Excellent move. So it's clear that the piece has to be returned. Well, first of all, Divya throws in rook b1, attacking the queen. Then this is attacked, so exchanges on d6 and then takes on c6, and Humpy recaptures. So black is a pawn up, but white has all these pieces in play. So while the king is on a slightly poor square, well, very poor square, because the rooks are split, black isn't coordinated. So white has to try and drum up some play. while black is so poorly coordinated. So that attacks this pawn, rook c8, a check, and queen takes a7. Okay, now we're going to see why this pawn move, h5, was so important. Because it allows the rook to get into play. And the counterattack begins, because that rook can just slip to g6. Possibly one of these squares as well, in some circumstances. And black is actually reasonably well coordinated. You know, these pieces are on decent squares. So the game went h4. So that solves white's background problem. Rook g6 threatens mate. g3, queen f3. So the counterattack begins. And obviously, black is already threatening to draw. Actually, that probably wouldn't draw, because actually the queen is in a decent position to actually interpose. But okay, it's quite clear that this counterattack is starting to develop, and indeed, if this rook manages to swing up the board, then that could be very nasty indeed. So rook e3 hits the queen. And the players repeated the position after these checks. And it looked like a draw was on the cards. But this shows incredible fighting spirit. Divya not cowed by the strength of opposition. She shows that she wants to play for a win. King h2. Still trying to squeeze something from the position. Rook f6, but black's counterplay is pretty good here. So rook b2 defends. Queen f1. You can see Humpy is very active here. Rook e2 and rook c5. Yeah, this rook potentially coming into the game, and it also blocks out the queen. So now it's white's turn at the other end of the board. And the queen could dash back here, but no. Both players really going for it, actually. I mean, I would have to say I would be quite reluctant to play a move like f4 because it can potentially expose the king. But yeah, Divya really wants to test her opponent, her esteemed opponent. d5. Rook e8. Rook b5, excellent move. So this just shuts out the rook on b2. If it moves to the side, then rook b1, and that's very nasty for white. So after a check, Divya took the rook, but now, of course, it's just perpetual check at the other end of the board. And there we go. That was the end of that. So after 41 moves, this game ended in a draw. But a very exciting first game with both players finding, I think, some excellent moves. Very enterprising opening from Divya Deshmukh. Really impressed by that. But very impressed with the way that Humpy managed to defend this. That's a key move, not an obvious move, h5. But yes, it looks like queen e2, in fact, was a very, very powerful move. But there you go. Game 2 tomorrow. Of course, with Humpy having white. And, well, it's going to be a very, very interesting contest. Of course, if both games are drawn, then they go to tie breaks. And, well, we'll see what happens then. Anyway, thanks for watching.